Feature stuff.
Welcome back to Things and Stuff. It's been a while, Charles.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. It's been kind of tough lately.
Oh, that's okay. It's been a tough time for everyone. So, what exciting project you have for us today?
Just a severed hand. Ringing a doorbell?
Okay. Oh, you mean from the movie House?
Yeah, that's it.
Ah, the cult classic horror movie from the 80s. Well, did you know that the poster for that movie was illustrated by Bill Morrison? Bill is known for his amazing artwork for many famous movies and TV shows, but most people will recognise his work on The Simpsons, Futurama, and many Disney films. One of which caused quite a controversy, as people were convinced that he had drawn phallic symbols all over the Little Mermaid poster. The reality was it was an unfinished piece that was rushed into final print and used in its unfinished state.
Nah, I'm pretty sure that's a huge deal.
Did you know that another controversy surrounding his work was an art piece created by an artist named Cause, which pretty much seemed to be an exact copy of Bill Simpson's Yellow album, but with some crosses added as eyes and a few other slight alterations. This piece, titled The Cause Album, gee, that's original, sold for roughly $14.8 million. Can you believe that? Copying someone else's artwork had scored him nearly $15 million.
I just want to add that the copying and sale of that artwork has played no role whatsoever in my decision to once again recreate one of Bill's artworks.
That's okay, Charles. I'm pretty sure your recreation is done with the best of intentions.
I'm in the money. I'm in the money.
Charles?
Money, money, money. Must be funny.
Charles?
In a rich man's world.
Let's get on with the project, shall we?
Casting the hand.
Okay, to start off, Charles grabbed some PVC pipe and some dental alginate. He then hot glued the pipe to a board and began mixing the alginate. Once it was fully mixed, he poured it into the PVC pipe, then completely covered his hand and pushed it all the way down into the pipe.
Oh, it's all squishy and cold.
Is it, Charles? Then after the alginate had set, he removed his hand, mixed up some plaster and poured it into the mould, being careful to tap out any air bubbles. Once set, he removed the alginate and then he had a plaster copy of his hand. All that was left to do was clean up some tiny bumps and then, using some epoxy sculpt, patch up any air bubbles and imperfections in the casting. He then covered the hand in a layer of silicone and then made another mould using the previous method with the PVC pipe. This created a permanent mould that he could pour some monster clay into to create a clay copy of his hand.
Ah!
Oh yes, one has to be very careful with boiling hot monster clay. If you accidentally get it on your skin, you will end up with some serious burns. It's kind of like pouring boiling hot wax all over your skin. Then cooling it under a tap just causes it to solidify and fuse to all the blisters and welts you just created. They look like some pretty nasty burns there, Charles. Are you okay?
No.
Ah, you poor bugger. A good tip is to always make sure you wear protective equipment, folks. You have to make sure you keep yourself safe.
Now you tell me.
Anyway, after getting all bandaged up and returning from the hospital, he inspected the finished copy of his hand.
Yeah, it's all done. Sculpting the hand.
Alright, now that he has a copy of his hand in clay, he has to refine it to look more like the one in the picture. To do that, Charles marked out where he wanted to start carving. Then, using various tools, he began sculpting, scraping, melting, scratching, and refining. Now, a good tip when scratching details and wrinkles is to cover your sculpt in talcum powder. This will help prevent the clay from sticking to itself and make cleaning stray bits of clay from your work much easier. And there it is, a spooky severed hand. You've done a good job there, Charles.
Oh, thanks. It would have been easier just to use a real severed hand.
I'm pretty sure that would have been difficult to source one of those, Charles.
Nah, there's plenty down in the basement. I'll go get you one if you want.
No, that's okay, Charles. Let's just move along, shall we?
The matrix mould.
Okay, the matrix mould. This is a rather detailed and complicated process, but we will try to cover as much of it as possible so that you can get a basic understanding of the steps involved. The first step is to mark out a dividing line around your sculpt. You want to divide your sculpt in two and in a manner in which it will separate or split easily. Once the parting lines were complete, Charles got some paper towels and began wetting and placing them on one half of the mould, being careful not to go over the lines that he had marked out. This will help with the cleaning of the clay off later on. He then laid out some clay and began building up a wall to meet the halfway line. He tries to get the clay as close as possible to a 90-degree angle from his hand sculpture. He then worked on getting it as smooth as possible.
Oh yeah, so smooth.
Okay, settle down there, Charles. Once complete, he laid down some more paper towels to protect the sculpture. He then began to put a layer of clay over the hand at the thickness that he wanted his silicone to be. He then once again cleaned it up and got it all nice and smooth.
Oh yeah, that feels so smooth.
Charles.
What? It is.
He then cut out some strips of clay and started laying it around the edges. This part will help make the silicone register into the jacket mould.
Then smooth it all out. Oh yeah.
He also placed some registration points on top of the mould and also placed keys around the edges. And yes, smooth those out too. He built up a clay wall around the edges to assist with the plastering process, which would stop the plaster from leaking out everywhere. Don't forget your pour spout, that's important for later on. He then mixed up some plaster and began to cover the entire surface. He carefully used the brush to work it into all those edges and crevices to push out any air that may get trapped. He used some plaster bandages to add a little support around the pour spout, and then kept building up the layers of plaster until it was a thickness he was happy with. When it was set, he cut off the excess from the pour spout, flipped it over, and began the process of removing all the clay from the bottom half. He then got the entire surface nice and smooth.
Yeah, you know it, baby.
Then Charles had to do the whole process over again. Cover it in paper towel, layer of clay,
so smooth.
Adding the registration points and keys, and covering it again in plaster. Once that was set, he just cleaned the moulds up with a rasp to get rid of the sharp edges and to make the mould nice and, refined.
No, smooth.
Then, using a screwdriver, he separated the moulds and began cleaning out all the clay. Now, all the clay that he removed was squashed down into a container. This would let him know how much silicone he would need to fill his mould later on. He then started marking out all the points where the air may get trapped. then drilled them out. Now his mould was ready to be put back together and pour in the silicone. But first he had to carve in some registration keys. These registration marks are so the silicone moulds will nicely lock into one another. A good little tip is to place some tubing or straws in all those bleeder holes. Just make sure they are taller than the point where you will be pouring in your silicone. That way you won't have to run around constantly plugging holes when you are pouring in your silicone. Charles then strapped his mould together and smeared wet clay all around the parting line of the mould. This will stop any silicone from leaking out. Some people like to use hot glue for this step, but Charles finds that the clay works perfectly and is much easier to clean off later on. Then, due to thinking the camera was recording but wasn't, Charles poured the silicone into the mould. There it is, all filled up. Then he removed the straws, cleaned off all the clay, and separated the moulds. He then removed the clay and began the process of cleaning off the excess flashing from around the mould. He then built a clay tube to make a cavity for a pour spout. As this was only attached via the clay, he brushed on a little silicone to help it stay in place. Once set, he covered the entire surface of the silicone in Vaseline to stop it from sticking to the silicone that he was just about to pour in. It's a very important step. If you don't do it, your two halves of silicone will be stuck together. He once again strapped his mould together and poured in some silicone.
I made sure I was recording this time.
Well, that does help, Charles. Oh, and here's another handy tip. You can place your mould on top of an air compressor so the vibrations help work the air to the top. When that was set, Charles pulled out his little plug, which left a nice little hole to pour resin in. He then poured in some silicone to create a silicone plug. When that was set, he carefully separated the moulds, removed the hand, and was left with a two-piece matrix mould. He now could make a duplicate of the hand in resin.
Resin casting.
Okay, to make a casting, Charles is going to use a two-part resin called Replicast. He will add a little bit of black pigment, just a tiny amount, so that the casting comes out nice and grey. Always remember to use a mask when working with resin or dangerous chemicals. First step is to put some talcum powder in the moulds and mix it around so that it covers the entire surface. This will help the resin draw into every little detail in the mould. Just take it outside and use a brush or air compressor to blow out the excess talc out of the mould. You should have something like that. Nice coverage on the entire surface. Charles did the same for the other half and strapped the moulds together. He then put in a little bit of black pigment, added the resin, gave it a good mix, and poured it into the mould. He then popped the plug into place and proceeded to rotate the mould. Now, a good way to test if the resin is cured enough is to check a little bit you have left in your cup. When it has set enough to stick to the walls of the cup but not fully cured, you can remove the plug and wipe away the resin and get ready to pour in the next batch. He repeats this process over and over until he is satisfied that the hand is filled enough with resin. Then, using screwdrivers, he gently pries the moulds apart and carefully removes the hand from the mould.
Oh, it's just a little bit stuck. I just need to,
You seem to be struggling there, Charles.
Yeah, hang on, I'm trying. There's just this little bit in here. I just have to wiggle this thingy part here.
Are you alright?
Yeah, it's coming. Just chill. Nearly got it. There we go.
Okay, then he had a casting of his hand. There's a little bit of flashing and cleanup to do, but other than that, it's a pretty good result for a first cast.
the doorbell.
So, Charles now has a finished hand, but the next thing he needs to do is create a doorbell. And to do that, he got some MDF board, which just happened to be the perfect thickness for his needs. So he measured it out and cut it to shape. Then, using the picture of a bell, he created a stencil to draw onto another piece of MDF. When he cut that out, he had himself a tool to help him create the bell out of clay. But he had to glue a skewer on there to act as a rotating point. Then he plopped down some clay roughly the size that the bell would be. Then, using his new tool, he proceeded to create the bell.
Round and round we go.
He did end up using some wood for the buzzer part though, because the clay wasn't exactly cooperating, was it, Charles?
Nope, certainly wasn't.
The next step was to make a mould of the bell, so he hot glued some walls around the bell, poured in some silicone, and once that was set, he had himself a mould of the bell. He then got some pigment powders and brushed them onto a bit of silicone to test to see which one looked the best. He then poured on some resin and waited for it to set.
Do you know what the best thing to do is while waiting for resin to set?
Charles?
Yes, that's right. Eat Smith's chips. Smith's chips are the world's best chips to eat while waiting for resin to set. You can't go wrong when eating Smith's chips.
Charles, they are not going to sponsor you.
Aw, it was worth a try, gee.
Anyway, once that had set, Charles checked to see which colour best matched the bell, and then he brushed that pigment all over his mould. Then he poured in some resin. Once that was set, he added some washes and a nut and poured in some more resin.
Look at it set. It's like magic.
And then he had a finished bell that the hand snugly slotted into.
Oh, it's kind of creepy, isn't it? Yucky bits.
Now that he had his hand and his bell, he needed to create the yucky bits.
You know, all the blood and gooey stuff hanging down, and the little worm too.
For this, he used some super sculpting. He began by rolling out some little worms, then getting it to the size he wanted. He gently carved in some wrinkles, then softened them down by brushing on some Sculpey softener. Once it was baked and hardened, he then had himself a little worm.
Shh, don't tell everyone.
He repeated the same process for all the other dangly bits and veins. Then he made moulds of them and ended up with these castings. Then he glued them all onto the hand and it was now ready for painting.
Painting.
Okay, the painting. The first thing Charles decided to paint was the little label that went on the bell. To do this, he just painted a black wash all over and then used the brush to wipe it off.
Turned out pretty good, I think.
Yes, it did, Charles. Next job was the bell. He mixed up some darker pigment into some clear gloss paint and then blotched it on randomly to give it a worn and aged look. Now for the hand, he began by airbrushing a dark brown all over, followed by some green, then some red tones, then dry brushed some yellow to add some highlights. Next was adding the darker details into all the nooks and crannies, followed by flicking speckles of many different colours all over the hand to break up that flat look of the green and to add some depth and texture to the hand. He then painted white on all the bones and then did some light black washes to age them and dirty them up a bit. Then he followed up with some high gloss varnish and painted it all over the blood and all the areas that he wanted to give a wet look. And there it is, the finished hand.
Oh, it's pretty scary. Woodwork.
Woodwork is Charles's least favourite step in the creation process, but to start he began by making a display box the size of the poster. He then needed to make the side panels that ran down the side. To do this, he just cut some balsa wood, roughed it up with a metal brush, and glued them down onto some more wood. He then got some wood filler and filled all the gaps on the sides, making sure to make it all nice and smooth.
Yeah, smooth. That's it. Now you're getting the hang of it.
He then made a mould by adding multiple layers of brushed on silicone. When it was set, he cut off some excess around the sides, then built walls around it and covered it in a layer of plaster. And then he had a mould of that wooden side panel thingy, if he ever needed it. You never know with Charles, he's always wrecking things.
Hey, that's not very nice.
But it's true, Charles.
Oh, yeah.
Then he drilled it all together, test fitted where the hand would go, and checked for any clearance issues.
Lights and finishing touches.
Now the only thing left to do was the lighting and finishing touches. Initially, Charles was going to use LED strips to light up the hand, but after running a few tests, he wasn't 100% happy with the look, so he decided to go with some downlights instead. He felt they were a little bit brighter and more focused.
Yeah, they were shinier and stuff.
He then made holes for them to fit into and did all the necessary wiring work. He then had to paint his side wood thingy. He did this by painting on an undercoat of black, followed by some brown, and then dry brushed some lighter browns on top. But it wasn't good enough for his liking, so he gave it a black wash to really get into those grooves and hopefully make it pop a little. It turned out pretty good, Charles.
Thanks.
He then assembled it all and did a quick test of the lights. He also initially planned to have all the text on a sheet of acrylic that would sit on the front of the display. He spent countless hours carefully weeding out every single letter in vinyl and laying them onto the acrylic sheet in the precise position. While it did look fantastic with the lights off, unfortunately, with the lights on they got completely washed out and it completely ruined the look Charles was after. So he decided to glue down the text on the back of the piece instead.
Yeah, I wasn't too impressed with wasting all those hours.
He made some custom light covers that he glued down with some wood glue, and then he was all set.
Job done. Let's see this puppy. The final reveal. With special guest Bill Morrison.
Pause right here. Before we continue any further, I think it's important to mention that this is actually the second part of a two-part video that Bill had sent Charles, but somehow Charles accidentally deleted the first part while clearing up hard drive space. Isn't that right, Charles?
I didn't mean it.
Let's continue, shall we?
Hi, Bill Morrison here again, and it's a few months since the last time I recorded. And when I opened this beauty and discovered that it was damaged, this is the original hand. So you can see where it was broken off here. And so Charles, rather than walking me through how to repair the busted hand, he actually made a new one for me. So I'm about to open that right now. This is incredibly well packed, but I'm still trying to very carefully unwrap it here. So I'll make sure you can see this here as I unwrap it. Oh, this looks really good. The worm is intact. The worm broke off on the original one. I'm trying to be really careful because I don't want to damage it while unwrapping it. That would be tragic. Here we go. The veins are all in good shape. Oh, look at that. All right, just one more thing to take off here. This is like unwrapping a mummy. Okay, I need to get a knife for that. Okay. There it is. Oh man, that's gorgeous. Look at that. Look at all that detail. Okay, so apparently what I have to do now is I need to remove this original door buzzer, and then I have to use that to mark holes, to drill new holes in this doorbell plate, and then reattach it, and then I should be good. So I'm not going to keep the camera running for that. Stay tuned. Okay, I managed to attach the hand and the doorbell to the rest of the sculpture. So here it is. And in the reflection, you can see my very messy studio. So the next step is, and sorry about all the reflection, by the way, but the next step will be to turn on the lights, and I'll do that next. Well, I tried plugging it in and it didn't work. It didn't light up. And I assume that means that the voltage or whatever is incompatible here in the US with the Australian, even though Charles was nice enough to include an adapter. I think it's just not going to work right now. I'm going to have to probably have it rewired. But anyway, there it is. It's a thing of beauty. Thank you, Charles. Thank you so much. And I hope you'll answer my calls when you're rich and famous someday, from being an incredible artist or prop maker or whatever it is that you're going to end up being. Please take my calls.
The better final reveal.
Charles, be nice.
What? It's true. The guy can draw, but he can't film to save himself.
Charles?
Yeah, next time I want a tour of Bill's office, I'll just send him another art piece.
Hang on, Charles. Stop. Don't you always give away each thing you make to a lucky viewer? How can you do that if you've already sent this hand to Bill?
Oh, that's easy. I made two. And I still wasn't happy. Guess I'll just have to give this away to a lucky viewer.
Well, I guess if you want a chance to win this handy little thing, just answer the question we're about to ask. But make sure you've been paying close attention. Charles sometimes likes to make them tricky.
No, I don't. It's really easy.
You can leave the answers here in the comment section, or also on the Things and Stuff Facebook page that links to this video. If you do both, you will probably increase your chances of winning.
By 2.
All links provided in the description. Best of luck to everyone. Okay, the question. What famous rap singer does Charles parody in this video? Well, that was a handy little project, Charles. I wonder what you will make for us next time. It's good to have you back.
Back again.
Charles is back.
Tell a friend. I'm creating some monsters, because everyone wants to see monsters more. They like statues and pop figures. If you want to see me, here's a tip I'll give you. Don't expect a live feed. Or a page on Twitter. Some jobs take so long I should start quicker, but I stop and I'm shocked. It is horrible. Lacking motivation is debilitating, and my hands and my brain aren't cooperating. You waited so long, I've been hibernating, but I'm back and you're glad, and now celebrating. I know I've got a lot of jobs in waiting, but I've been stuck in a rut and procrastinating. So my OCD won't let me be, or let me be me, so let me see. It makes me feel down and not happy, but it feels so empty without me. So doing jack has become a habit. That time to flip and rewrite the script, so get ready, cause it's about to get heavy. I just got some motivation. I'm ready. Now this looks like a job for me, so everyone just follow me, cause we need a little controversy, cause it feels so empty without me. Oh, it doesn't matter. Cause Charles works, Charles creates figs and stuff. Figs and stuff! I just make figs and stuff, yeah.